This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Daniel Deronda was a young man shrouded in mystery. He had no knowledge of his true parentage, a fact that would shape his life in ways he could not yet imagine. The grand halls of Sir Hugo Mallinger's estate echoed with the laughter and chatter of children, but Daniel always felt like an outsider looking in. He found himself under the care of the wealthy English aristocrat who had taken him in as a ward for reasons unknown. From his earliest memories, a sense of otherness clung to Daniel like a shadow. He'd watched Sir Hugo's children play in the sprawling gardens, their carefree giggles carried on the breeze, while he stood apart, a silent observer. This awareness ignited a flame of curiosity within him, a burning desire to uncover the truth about his origins that grew stronger with each passing day. Sir Hugo, recognizing Daniel's potential, spared no expense in providing him with the finest education and money could buy. The hallowed halls of Eton welcomed Daniel, their ancient stones whispering secrets of countless generations past. Later, the prestigious grounds of Cambridge became his world, where the scent of old books and the rustle of academic robes filled the air. Here, surrounded by the sons of England's elite, he honed his intellect and expanded his horizons. Yet even as he excelled in his studies, Daniel felt like a fish out of water in the glittering world of the aristocracy. At lavish parties and grand soirees, where champagne flowed like water and laughter echoed off marble walls, Daniel often found himself standing apart. The clinking of crystal glasses and the rustle of silk gowns seemed to emphasize his sense of displacement. It was during these moments that the gnawing feeling in the pit of his stomach grew strongest, a constant reminder that he didn't quite belong. As Daniel matured, so did his empathy and compassion for others. These qualities set him apart from his peers, many of whom viewed the world through the narrow lens of privilege. Daniel's heart went out to those less fortunate, and he found himself drawn to acts of kindness and charity like a moth to a flame. One crisp autumn day, while walking through a less affluent part of London, Daniel stumbled upon the Merrick family. The cobblestone streets echoed with the sounds of daily life, children playing, vendors calling out their wares, a stark contrast to the manicured silence of Sir Hugo's estate. Mrs. Merrick, a widow with 3 daughters, lived in a modest home that exuded warmth and love, despite its humble appearance. The moment Daniel stepped through their door, the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of lively conversation enveloped him like a warm embrace. The Merricks welcomed Daniel with open arms, and he soon became a frequent visitor to their home. Mrs. Merrick's motherly affection and the sisters' easy companionship filled a void in Daniel's heart he hadn't even realized existed. In their small, cozy parlor, with its worn but comfortable furniture and walls lined with well-loved books, Daniel found a different kind of wealth, one measured in love and genuine connection. As time passed, Daniel's questions about his background intensified. He began to notice subtle differences in how Sir Hugo treated him compared to his own children. A lingering glance here, a hesitation there, small things that most would overlook. But to Daniel, they were like pieces of a puzzle he was desperate to solve. Each interaction with Sir Hugo became a study in nuance, leaving Daniel's mind whirling with possibilities and unanswered questions. One evening, as Daniel stood before the grand fireplace in Sir Hugo's study, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls, he gathered the courage to broach the subject of his parentage. The crackling fire seemed to hold its breath as Daniel spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Sir Hugo's response was kind but evasive, his words as slippery as the shadows that danced around them. Daniel left the study with more questions than answers, the mystery of his origins hanging over him like a heavy fog. Daniel's compassionate nature, coupled with his own sense of otherness, drove him to seek out those in need of help. He found purpose in assisting the downtrodden, whether it was offering financial aid to a struggling family or providing comfort to a lonely soul. In helping others, Daniel felt he was somehow getting closer to understanding himself, each act of kindness a step towards unraveling the mystery of his own identity. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Daniel stood at the window of his room, gazing out at the sprawling grounds of Sir Hugo's estate. The manicured gardens and stately trees seemed to stretch endlessly, much like the questions that filled his mind. His quest for self-discovery had only just begun, and he knew that the path ahead would be filled with challenges and revelations. With a deep breath, Daniel turned from the window, ready to face whatever the future held. As he did so, a glint of something caught his eye. There on his desk lay a letter he hadn't noticed before. His heart raced as he picked it up, recognizing the elegant handwriting. It was from Gwendolen Harleth, a young woman whose name he had heard whispered in social circles. What could she want with him? And why did the thought of her fill him with such anticipation and dread? Gwendolen Harleth was a young woman whose striking beauty turned heads wherever she went. Her unwavering self-assurance, however, was about to be put to the ultimate test. The news of her family's sudden financial ruin crashed upon her like a tidal wave, its roar drowning out all other thoughts. The once opulent halls of their home now echoed with the hollow whispers of lost fortune, each creaking floorboard a reminder of their fall from grace. Gwendolen's fingers trembled as she clutched the telegram, its crisp paper a stark contrast to the crumbling world around her. In her bedroom, now feeling more like a cage than a sanctuary, Gwendolen paced. The worn carpet beneath her feet seemed to mock her with every step, a far cry from the plush rugs she had once taken for granted. The mirror, once her faithful companion, now reflected a face etched with worry, her usually confident green eyes clouded with a storm of uncertainty. The prospect of becoming a governess loomed over her like a suffocating shroud. Gwendolen's stomach churned at the thought of tending to other people's children, her proud spirit rebelling against the idea of being at the beck and call of strangers. She was meant for greater things, wasn't she? The question hung in the air, unanswered and taunting. It was in this moment of despair that fate, or perhaps mere chance, intervened. Henley Grandcourt entered Gwendolen's life like a beacon of hope in the misty landscape of Leubronn, the German spa town where she had sought temporary refuge. The wealthy bachelor's attention felt like a soothing balm to Gwendolen's wounded pride, his wealth promising a return to the life she thought she deserved. Yet something about Grandcourt made her skin prickle with unease. His eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to assess her worth like a prized mare at auction. The clink of his cufflinks as he moved reminded Gwendolen of the sound of chains, a subtle warning she chose to ignore. Amidst the hushed murmurs and the rhythmic click of chips at the gambling table, Gwendolen's world shifted once again. Her gaze locked with that of Daniel Deronda, and for a moment, time stood still. Unlike Grandcourt's icy demeanor, Deronda radiated warmth and integrity. His eyes, when they met hers, seemed to pierce through the carefully constructed facade she presented to the world. For a fleeting moment, Gwendolen felt seen, truly seen, and it both thrilled and terrified her. But reality, harsh and unyielding, soon reasserted itself. The weight of her family's expectations pressed down upon her like a physical force, each breath a struggle against the tide of responsibility. Gwendolen found herself torn between the stirrings of genuine attraction she felt for Deronda and the practical solution Grandcourt represented. The revelation of Grandcourt's past, his former mistress Lydia Glasher and their children, should have been the final nail in the coffin of any potential union. Gwendolen's initial reaction was to flee, to escape back to the comforting anonymity of Leubronn. But as she sat in her small hotel room, staring out at the unfamiliar German landscape, the gravity of her family's situation crashed over her anew. With trembling hands, she penned a letter accepting Grandcourt's proposal. Each stroke of the pen felt like a betrayal of herself, of the idealistic young woman she had once been. The faces of her mother and sisters swam before her eyes, their futures hanging in the balance. What choice did she have? As Gwendolen prepared to return and seal her fate, a final obstacle presented itself. Lydia Glasher, her eyes burning with a mixture of desperation and barely contained rage, cornered Gwendolen. Her words, sharp as knives, cut through the air between them. "You must protect my children," Lydia pleaded, her voice raw with emotion. "Grandcourt is not the man you think he is. He will crush your spirit as surely as he crushed mine." For a moment, Gwendolen wavered. The weight of the choice before her seemed almost too much to bear. But then she straightened her spine, pushed aside the nagging voice of conscience, and made her decision. She would marry Grandcourt, for her family, for her future, for the life she believed she deserved. As Gwendolen boarded the train that would take her back to England and her new life, she pushed aside thoughts of Daniel Deronda, of Lydia Glasher's warning, of the path not taken. She had made her choice, driven by desperation and ambition rather than love. And as the landscape blurred past the window, Gwendolen couldn't shake the feeling that she was hurtling towards a future that would test her in ways she could never have imagined. The train whistle pierced the air, a mournful sound that seemed to echo Gwendolen's inner turmoil. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, casting long shadows across the platform, Gwendolen's thoughts drifted to Daniel Deronda. Little did she know that at that very moment, miles away, the River Thames flowed languidly under the fading light of dusk, its surface mirroring the complexities of life, a silent witness to the pivotal moment that awaited Daniel Deronda, and the unseen threads of fate that would soon intertwine their destinies once more. The River Thames flowed languidly under the fading light of dusk. Its surface mirrored the complexities of life, a silent witness to the pivotal moment that awaited Daniel Deronda. He stood on the riverbank, lost in thought, the cool breeze ruffling his dark hair. The city's din faded into the background, leaving only the gentle lapping of water against stone. Suddenly, a splash shattered the tranquil scene. Daniel's eyes snapped to the river, widening in shock as he spotted a young woman plunging into the murky depths. Her dress billowed around her like a dark cloud, a stark contrast against the muddy waters. Without hesitation, Daniel shed his coat, the fabric hitting the ground with a soft thud. He dove into the chilly river, the cold biting into his skin. The current tugged at his limbs, threatening to pull him under. Each stroke was a battle against the river's relentless pull. His lungs burned as he swam toward the sinking figure. The woman had stopped struggling, her body limp in the water's embrace. With a final burst of energy, Daniel reached her. His arms snaked around her waist and he kicked hard, fighting to break the surface. They erupted from the water with a gasp. The woman coughed and sputtered, her dark hair plastered to her pale face. Daniel's muscles screamed in protest as he swam them both to shore, their sodden clothes weighing them down like anchors. Collapsing on the riverbank, Daniel finally got a good look at the woman he had saved. She was young, with delicate features that spoke of a life filled with hardship, but it was her eyes that captivated him, deep pools of sorrow that seemed to hold the weight of the world. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his breath still coming in ragged gasps. "Mirah," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the river's song. "Mirah Lapidoth." As concerned passers-by wrapped them in blankets, Mirah's story unfolded like a tapestry of tragedy and hope. She spoke of Prague, her words painting vivid pictures of narrow streets and ancient synagogues. Daniel listened, entranced, as she told of a father who saw her only as a meal ticket, forcing her onto stages and into the arms of wealthy men. "I was just a child," Mirah said, her voice cracking, "torn from my mother and brother, thrust into a world that wanted to use me, to break me." Daniel's heart ached with each revelation. He could see the pain etched in the lines of Mirah's face, hear the longing in her voice as she spoke of the family she had lost. "I came to England hoping to find them," she explained, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "But I've searched for so long, and now I have nothing left." As night fell and the city lights began to twinkle along the riverbank, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't leave this fragile soul to face the world alone. "I know a family," he said, his voice warm with reassurance. "The Marics. They're good people, kind people. They can give you a safe place to stay while we figure things out." Mirah looked at him, hope and wariness warring in her expression. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel smiled gently. "Because everyone deserves a chance at happiness, at finding their place in the world." The Maric home was a haven of warmth and light in the growing darkness. Mrs. Maric, a motherly figure with kind eyes and a welcoming smile, ushered them in without hesitation. Her daughters fluttered around Mirah, offering dry clothes and comforting words. As Daniel watched Mirah being enveloped by the Maric family's kindness, he felt something shift within him. The world he had known, with its rigid social structures and expectations, suddenly seemed smaller, less significant. In Mirah's story, In the depths of her eyes, he saw a glimpse of a culture rich with history and tradition, a people who had faced unimaginable hardships yet persevered. That night, as Daniel made his way home, the streets of London seemed different. The synagogues he passed, once mere architectural curiosities, now held a new fascination. He found himself wondering about the lives lived within those walls, about the stories and struggles of a people he had never truly considered before. In the quiet of his room, Daniel's mind raced with questions. Who was he really? What was his place in this vast, complex world? The encounter with Mirah had awakened something in him, a hunger for knowledge, for understanding. As he drifted off to sleep, Daniel's last thoughts were of Mirah's haunting melody, the sound of her voice. She had softly sung a lullaby in Hebrew. It was a language he didn't understand, yet it resonated deep within his soul, calling him towards a future he could not yet imagine. Little did Daniel know that this chance encounter would be the catalyst for a journey of self-discovery that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the world. As he closed his eyes, a strange sense of anticipation washed over him, as if the universe was whispering secrets just beyond his understanding. What truths would tomorrow bring? Daniel Deronda's encounter with Mirah had ignited a passionate curiosity within him. Inspired by her story and drawn to her heritage, he felt an irresistible pull towards exploring Jewish culture and history. The bustling streets of London, once familiar, now seemed to pulse with hidden mysteries. Daniel's eyes darted from building to building, noticing details he'd overlooked countless times before. The ornate facades of synagogues stood out like jewels among the drab brick and stone, their intricate designs a stark contrast to the austere Anglican churches of his youth. Heart-pounding, Daniel approached his first synagogue. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, releasing a wave of scented air, beeswax, old books, and something indefinable. Inside, the low murmur of prayer washed over him. Men wrapped in prayer shawls swayed gently, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic chant. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, overwhelmed by a sense of connection he couldn't explain. Driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge, Daniel sought out Jewish scholars. In dimly lit studies, surrounded by towering bookshelves, he engaged in passionate discussions. The scholars' eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as they unraveled complex interpretations, their weathered hands gesturing emphatically. Daniel found himself swept away by their fervor, each conversation leaving him hungry for more. As autumn painted the city in shades of gold and red, Daniel embarked on a new challenge, learning Hebrew. The strange, angular letters danced before his eyes, slowly transforming from mysterious symbols into a language rich with history. Under the guidance of a patient scholar, Daniel immersed himself in Jewish literature, each new word feeling like a key unlocking a hidden world. His exploration led him to the Cohen family's second-hand bookshop, a labyrinth of towering shelves and musty tomes. The shop was a sensory overload, the crackle of old paper, the scent of leather bindings, and the soft murmur of browsing customers. Here among the dusty volumes, Daniel found more than just books. He discovered a window into Jewish family life. The Cohens welcomed him into their home with open arms, their warmth a stark contrast to the cool formality of his upbringing. Sitting at their Sabbath table, Daniel was enveloped in a cocoon of flickering candlelight and joyous faces. The rich aroma of traditional dishes filled the air as prayers were sung and stories shared. In these moments, a sense of belonging washed over him, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. As Daniel delved deeper into this world, he felt as if he were uncovering hidden parts of himself. It was like finding missing pieces of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. The prejudices and misconceptions about Jews that he had unconsciously absorbed from English society began to crumble away, replaced by a growing appreciation and respect. His newfound knowledge became a lens through which he viewed the world. The superficiality of the aristocratic circles he was raised in stood in sharp relief against the depth and richness of Jewish tradition. Daniel found himself questioning his place in English society, the certainties of his upbringing suddenly less solid than they once seemed. His relationship with Sir Hugo, once a cornerstone of his life, began to shift. Conversations that once flowed easily now felt strained, as if they were speaking different languages. Daniel's growing sense of purpose and connection to a larger community contrasted sharply with the life he had known. As winter settled over London, blanketing the city in a hushed stillness, Daniel stood at a crossroads. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter had led him to question everything he thought he knew about himself. He felt a deep emotional connection to Judaism that both thrilled and frightened him. It was as if he had been sleepwalking through life and had suddenly awakened to a world of vibrant colors and profound meaning. Daniel's journey of cultural exploration had not only broadened his intellectual horizons, but also stirred something deep within his soul. This newfound connection to Judaism would shape his future decisions and relationships in ways he could not yet imagine, setting him on a path that would change the course of his life forever. As Daniel grappled with these profound changes, his thoughts drifted to Gwendolen Harleth. He recalled her vibrant spirit and the undeniable connection they had shared. A nagging worry gnawed at him. How was she faring in her new marriage? Little did he know that at that very moment, Gwendolen's world was crumbling around her, her once promising union revealing itself as a prison of emotional torment. Gwendolen Harleth's marriage to Henley Grandcourt had become a living nightmare. What once seemed a promising union now revealed itself as a prison of emotional abuse and control. The grand halls of their estate, once a symbol of Gwendolen's triumph, now echoed with an oppressive silence. Each step she took on the polished marble floors seemed to reverberate through her very soul, a constant reminder of her isolation. The air hung heavy with the scent of old books and polished wood, a suffocating reminder of the life she was now trapped in. Grandcourt, a man whose true nature had been hidden behind a veneer of aristocratic charm, systematically chipped away at Gwendolen's vibrant spirit. His methods were subtle yet devastating, like a poison slowly seeping through her veins. A raised eyebrow, a slight curl of his lip, a carefully chosen word. Each was a weapon in his arsenal, designed to break her down, piece by piece. Day by day, Gwendolen found herself more isolated. Friends and family, once frequent visitors, now seemed distant memories. The laughter and warmth that had once filled the halls were replaced by a cold, oppressive silence. Grandcourt orchestrated this separation with the precision of a puppet master, pulling strings Gwendolen couldn't even see. At social gatherings, his eyes would follow her every move, a constant reminder of his dominance. The weight of his gaze was like a physical presence, pressing down on her shoulders, making it hard to breathe. With a mere glance or a carefully chosen word, he could reduce her to silence, her cheeks burning with humiliation. The once vivacious Gwendolen, who had commanded attention with her wit and charm, now shrank into the shadows, desperate to avoid notice. The stables, once Gwendolen's sanctuary, stood silent and empty. The familiar scent of hay and leather that had once brought her comfort now only served as a painful reminder of what she had lost. Her beloved horses, symbols of her freedom and passion, were now off limits. The archery range, where she had once stood tall and proud, lay abandoned, the targets gathering dust. These small joys, stripped away, left gaping holes in Gwendolen's heart. Grandcourt wielded his knowledge of Gwendolen's past encounter with Lydia Glasher like a weapon, each reference a sharp reminder of her shame. The mere mention of Lydia's name would send a shiver down Gwendolen's spine. Her mind flooded with memories of that fateful day and the weight of her choices. It was as if Lydia's ghost haunted the halls of their home, a constant, unspoken presence that threatened to suffocate her. As weeks turned to months, Gwendolen's transformation was stark. The mirror reflected a stranger, a pale, hollow-eyed woman who bore little resemblance to the vivacious girl who had once captivated society. Dark circles shadowed her once bright eyes, and her skin had taken on a sickly pallor. She moved through the house like a ghost, her steps hesitant, her voice rarely rising above a whisper. Attempts to assert herself were met with Grandcourt's icy indifference, or, worse, veiled threats. His words about Lydia and her children hung in the air like storm clouds, ready to unleash their fury at any moment. Gwendolen learned to swallow her words, to shrink herself, anything to avoid his displeasure. The fire that had once burned so brightly within her was reduced to embers, struggling to stay alive. Her relationship with her mother, once a source of comfort, became strained under the weight of her unhappiness. Each visit was an exercise in deception, Gwendolen painting on a smile that never quite reached her eyes. The guilt of her lies ate away at her, adding another layer to her misery. She longed to confide in her mother, to seek solace in her embrace, but the words always died on her lips, choked by fear and shame. In this darkness, a single ray of light emerged. Daniel Deronda. Their encounters, though infrequent, became a lifeline for Gwendolen. In Daniel's presence, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time since her marriage. His calm demeanor and thoughtful words offered a stark contrast to the emotional turbulence of her daily life. When he spoke, it was as if a warm breeze had blown through the cold, oppressive atmosphere of her existence. As her desperation grew, so did Gwendolen's reliance on these moments with Daniel. She found herself confiding in him, her words tumbling out in a rush, as if afraid they might be her last. She spoke of her unhappiness, her fears, and the darkness that was growing within her. Her hands would tremble as she spoke, her eyes darting nervously, as if expecting Grandcourt to materialize at any moment. "I'm afraid, Daniel," she whispered during one of their conversations, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and something deeper, more dangerous. "I'm afraid of what I might do, of what I might become." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Daniel listened, his face a mask of concern and compassion. He offered what comfort he could, but both knew the precariousness of their situation. Their relationship, while platonic, teetered on the edge of propriety, adding another layer of tension to Gwendolen's already fraught existence. Each meeting was a risk, a stolen moment of solace in a world that seemed determined to crush her spirit. As summer approached, Grandcourt announced a yacht trip to the Mediterranean. What should have been an exciting adventure felt to Gwendolen like a sentence. The yacht, beautiful and luxurious, was just another gilded cage. The thought of being trapped at sea with Grandcourt sent waves of panic through her body, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Days at sea blurred together, the endless expanse of water mirroring the vastness of Gwendolen's despair. The gentle lapping of waves against the hull became a mocking rhythm, a constant reminder of her imprisonment. Grandcourt's presence was suffocating, his control absolute in the confined space of the vessel. With each passing day, Gwendolen's resentment and fear grew, a storm building within her to match the calm seas around them. As the yacht cut through the azure waters of the Mediterranean, Gwendolen stood at the rail, her knuckles white as she gripped the polished wood. The wind whipped her hair, carrying away the tears she refused to let fall. The salt spray stung her eyes, mingling with the tears she could no longer hold back. Behind her, she could feel Grandcourt's eyes, ever watchful, ever controlling. In that moment, with the vast sea before her and the prison of her marriage closing in, Gwendolen felt something inside her snap. The sea stretched out before her, endless and inviting. For a brief, terrifying moment, she imagined herself stepping over the rail, letting the cool waters embrace her, freeing her from this torment. The thought both thrilled and horrified her. As she stood there, teetering on the edge of despair, a sudden realization struck her. She couldn't go on like this. Something had to change. With trembling hands, she reached into her pocket, feeling the smooth surface of the locket Daniel had given her. Inside was a small note, hastily scribbled before their departure. "Hold on," it read. "I'm coming." As she clutched the locket, a spark of hope ignited in her heart. Daniel was searching for something, or someone. Could this be her chance for escape? The stage was set for a tragedy, the likes of which neither she nor anyone else could have foreseen. As the yacht sailed on, carrying her further from everything she knew, Gwendolen made a silent vow. She would survive this no matter the cost. And when Daniel found what he was looking for, she would be ready. Little did she know that at that very moment, back in London, Daniel Deronda was intensifying his search for Mirah long-lost family, particularly her brother Ezra. His quest would lead him through the diverse Jewish communities of London, setting in motion a chain of events that would irrevocably change both their lives. Daniel Deronda intensified his search for Mirah long-lost family. His efforts were particularly focused on locating her brother Ezra, a quest that would lead him through the diverse Jewish communities of London. The bustling streets of Victorian London unfolded before Daniel like a living, breathing entity. The city's heartbeat pulsed through its cobblestone arteries, each neighborhood a world unto itself. From the opulent mansions of the West End to the cramped tenements of the East, he traversed the city with a burning sense of purpose that grew stronger with each passing day. In the affluent areas, Daniel found himself amid manicured gardens and grand synagogues. The polished facades gleamed in the weak sunlight, a stark contrast to the grime-covered buildings of the poorer districts. Here he spoke with well-dressed rabbis, their words carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. Yet for all their knowledge, they could offer no concrete leads on Mirah's family. The scent of wealth and privilege clung to these streets, but it left Daniel feeling hollow. He couldn't shake the feeling that the answers he sought lay elsewhere, hidden in the city's less savory corners. As Daniel ventured into the poorer East End, the contrast hit him like a physical blow. Narrow alleys echoed with a cacophony of languages, the air thick with the mingled scents of unfamiliar spices and poverty. Here in the heart of London's Jewish immigrant community, Daniel felt a strange sense of belonging stirring within him. He visited humble synagogues, their interiors warm with candlelight and prayer. The devotion he witnessed touched something deep inside him, a chord of recognition he couldn't quite explain. In these sacred spaces, Daniel observed rituals both familiar and foreign, each one adding another piece to the puzzle of his growing understanding. One particularly memorable encounter led Daniel to a small, cluttered bookshop. The musty scent of old tomes filled his nostrils as he met Joseph Kalonimos, an elderly Jewish scholar with eyes that twinkled with wisdom. Kalonimos, his beard as white as snow, became a fountain of knowledge, regaling Daniel with tales of Jewish history that stretched back through the centuries. "Young man," Kalonimos said, his voice gravelly but kind, "our people have wandered far and wide, but we carry our history with us, in our hearts and in our blood." His words resonated with Daniel, stirring questions about his own past that he had long buried. Through Kalonimos, Daniel gained invaluable contacts within the community. Each new acquaintance was a potential thread leading to Mirah's family, and Daniel followed them all with unwavering determination. His search brought him once again to the Cohen family. In their warm, chaotic home, Daniel found himself drawn into the rhythms of Jewish family life. The aroma of freshly baked challah filled the air as Mrs. Cohen fussed over him, insisting he join them for Shabbat dinner. As he broke bread with the Cohens, Daniel observed the easy affection between family members, the lively debates, and the deep-rooted traditions that bound them together. It was a stark contrast to his own upbringing, and he found himself longing for a sense of belonging he had never known he was missing. Through these experiences, Daniel's understanding of the challenges faced by Jewish immigrants grew. He saw firsthand the struggle to maintain identity in a foreign land, the tight-knit communities that offered support and solace. In the faces of those he met, Daniel recognized a resilience that both humbled and inspired him. As weeks turned into months, Daniel's search for Mirah's family became more than just a noble quest. It became a journey of self-discovery, each new encounter peeling back another layer of his own identity. The connection he felt to the Jewish people and their struggles grew stronger with each passing day, like a seedling pushing through soil toward the light. In quiet moments, Daniel found himself questioning everything he had ever known about himself. The sense of rootlessness that had always haunted him began to give way to something else, a growing certainty that he was on the cusp of uncovering a truth that would change everything. Yet, even as his own inner turmoil grew, Daniel's dedication to helping Mirah never wavered. Her story had become intertwined with his own, their fates linked in ways he was only beginning to understand. With each new lead, each dead end, Daniel's resolve only strengthened. As he navigated the complex web of Jewish social circles, from the scholarly to the working class, Daniel felt himself changing. The compassion that had always been a part of his nature deepened, tempered by a newfound understanding of struggle and perseverance. Daniel's immersion in the Jewish world was setting the stage for revelations he could not yet imagine. As he stood on the threshold of discovery, both for Mirah and for himself, Daniel Deronda felt a sense of anticipation building within him. Whatever lay ahead, he knew that his life would never be the same. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the narrow streets, Daniel found himself drawn to a dilapidated building on the outskirts of the Jewish quarter. A faded sign above the door caught his eye. Mordecai's book bindery. His heart raced as he approached, a strange feeling of destiny washing over him. Could this be the lead he had been searching for? With trembling fingers, he reached for the door handle, the weight of possibility heavy in the air. The scent of musty paper and aged leather filled Daniel's nostrils as he pushed open the creaky door of the old book bindery. Dust motes danced in the dim light, filtering through grimy windows, casting long shadows across the cluttered workspace. His eyes adjusted to the gloom, settling on a hunched figure at a workbench. Mordecai's nimble fingers wove pages together with practiced ease, but it was his eyes that caught Daniel's attention. As their gazes met, a jolt of recognition passed between them, though Daniel was certain they'd never met before. "I've been waiting for you," Mordecai said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with an unmistakable conviction. Daniel's brow furrowed, confusion etched across his features. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. Have we met before?" A small knowing smile played at the corners of Mordecai's mouth. "Not in this life, perhaps, but in the realm of destiny." "Most certainly." Despite the strangeness of the encounter, Daniel found himself drawn to Mordecai's passionate words and profound knowledge. The scholar's eyes gleamed with an inner fire as he spoke of his lifelong vision. A young man who would carry on his work of Jewish cultural and spiritual revival. Days melted into weeks, and Daniel found himself returning to the book bindery, pulled by an inexplicable force. Mordecai's words painted vivid pictures of a Jewish homeland, of a people reclaiming their heritage and shaping their future. These ideas resonated deep within Daniel, stirring something he hadn't known existed. Their conversations often took them to the banks of the Thames, where the gentle lapping of water against the shore provided a soothing backdrop to their impassioned discussions. The river, ever flowing and constant, became a symbol of the knowledge passed between them and the inexorable flow of destiny. "Look at the river, Daniel," Mordecai said one evening, his voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind. "It knows where it's going, just as you do, even if you can't see it yet." Daniel's initial skepticism slowly gave way to curiosity, then to a burning desire to learn more. Mordecai became more than just a chance acquaintance. He transformed into a mentor, a guide illuminating the path of Jewish history, philosophy, and mysticism. Their discussions often stretched long into the night, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls of Mordecai's modest lodgings. Daniel found himself captivated by tales of ancient wisdom and prophecies of future glory. With each passing day, he felt a growing sense of purpose, as if the scattered pieces of his identity were finally falling into place. Mordecai's influence extended beyond their private conversations. He introduced Daniel to a group of Jewish intellectuals who gathered in smoky back rooms of cafes, their heated debates on politics, religion, and culture opening Daniel's eyes to a world he had barely known existed. As Mordecai's health deteriorated, his impact on Daniel only grew stronger. The young man watched with a mixture of admiration and sorrow as his mentor's body weakened, even as his spirit seemed to burn ever brighter. "Promise me, Daniel," Mordecai said one day, his breath labored but his eyes clear, "that you'll carry this torch forward. Our people need you." Daniel felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders, a mantle he was both eager and hesitant to take up. He began to see himself as part of a larger narrative, connected to a rich cultural heritage and a vision for the future that stretched far beyond his own lifetime. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Thames in hues of gold and crimson, Daniel stood by the riverbank, lost in thought. The gentle current mirrored the tumultuous emotions swirling within him, a mix of excitement, trepidation, and a newfound sense of purpose. He felt changed, transformed by his encounters with Mordecai. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time Daniel felt he had a map to guide him, a map drawn by the hand of a dying visionary who had seen in him the promise of tomorrow. As Daniel turned to leave, a messenger boy came running towards him, out of breath and clutching a sealed envelope. "Mr. Deronda, Urgent message from Sir Hugo Mallinger. He requests your immediate presence at his estate. Daniel's heart raced as he broke the seal. The note inside was brief, but its implications were enormous. We must speak about your parentage. Come at once. A chill ran down Daniel's spine as he looked back at the river, its waters now dark and mysterious in the fading light. What secrets about his past were about to be revealed? And how would they affect the future he had just begun to envision? Sir Hugo Mallinger's eyes held a mix of apprehension and resolve. The moment had finally come for him to reveal the truth about Daniel Deronda's parentage. The study, once a sanctuary of warmth and knowledge, now felt oppressive. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by the flickering firelight, mirroring the turmoil in Sir Hugo's heart. Daniel sat across from him, his lean frame taut with anticipation, dark eyes searching Sir Hugo's face for answers. "Daniel, my boy," Sir Hugo began, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's something I must tell you about your mother." The words hung in the air, heavy and portentous. Daniel leaned forward, his breath catching in his throat. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to grow louder, marking each second of this life-altering moment. "Your mother is a Jewish singer named Al-Kharisi," Sir Hugo continued, his words falling like stones into still water. "She entrusted you to my care when you were just an infant." The revelation hit Daniel like a physical blow. He gasped, the sound sharp in the quiet room. His world, once solid and familiar, now seemed to shift beneath his feet. A kaleidoscope of emotions flashed across his face: relief, anger, confusion, and a strange sense of homecoming. "But why?" Daniel finally managed, his voice cracking. "Why did she give me up?" Sir Hugo's eyes softened with compassion. "She believed it was best for you, Daniel. She wanted you to have opportunities she felt she couldn't provide." Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He paced the room like a caged animal, the plush carpet muffling his footsteps but unable to quiet the storm of questions in his mind. The portraits of Mallinger ancestors seemed to watch him with new eyes, as if they too were privy to this long-held secret. "Tell me everything," he demanded, whirling to face Sir Hugo. His eyes blazed with a mix of hurt and curiosity. "Who was she? What was her life like? And my father, do you know anything about him?" As night fell outside the windows, casting long shadows across the room, Sir Hugo shared what he knew. He spoke of Al-Kharisi's background, her career as a renowned singer, and the little he knew of Daniel's father. With each piece of information, Daniel felt as if he were assembling a puzzle of his own identity. The revelation cast Daniel's entire life in a new light. His upbringing, his education, his inexplicable draw towards Jewish culture, all of it now viewed through a different lens. He thought of Mordecai and Mirah, realizing that his connection to them wasn't mere coincidence, but a call of shared heritage. As the clock chimed midnight, its sonorous tones echoing through the house, Daniel made a decision. His voice when he spoke was filled with determination. "I need to find her, Sir Hugo. I need to understand." Sir Hugo nodded, a mix of sadness and pride in his eyes. "I understand, my boy, and I'll help you in any way I can." Daniel stood at the window, gazing out at the night sky. The stars seemed to shine with new meaning, each one a potential clue to his past. He knew that this revelation was just the beginning of a journey to uncover his roots, to understand his mother's decisions, and to reconcile his English upbringing with his Jewish heritage. As dawn approached, Daniel felt a strange sense of peace amidst the turmoil. He was embarking on a quest that would challenge him, change him, and ultimately lead him to a deeper understanding of himself and his place in the world. With renewed purpose, Daniel left Sir Hugo's study and made his way to his own room. His mind raced with plans, questions, and possibilities. As he reached for the doorknob of his bedroom, he paused. Daniel's hand trembled, and he realized the air in the hallway felt thick, almost suffocating. It was as if the weight of his past and future pressed down on him from all sides, and he knew that once he stepped through that door, nothing would ever be the same again. Daniel's hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob. The air in the hallway felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the weight of his past and future pressed down on him from all sides. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the moment he'd dreamed of for so long. As the door creaked open, Daniel stepped into a world of shadows and secrets. Heavy curtains blocked out the bright Italian sun, casting the room in a twilight gloom that matched the uncertainty in his heart. The scent of faded perfume and old books hung in the air, a ghostly reminder of a lifelong past. In the center of the room, perched on a high-backed chair like a queen on her throne, sat Alcarisi. Her posture was regal, her chin lifted in defiance of the years that had etched lines around her eyes and mouth. As Daniel entered, those eyes, dark and intense, locked onto his face, searching hungrily for traces of herself in his features. "You've come," she said, her voice a mix of relief and trepidation. The words hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken emotions. Daniel nodded, his throat too tight for words. He felt rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by the gravity of the moment. Years of questions, of longing, of imagining this very scene, all of it condensed into the single, breathless instant. Alcarisi gestured for him to sit, her movements graceful despite the tension that radiated from her. As Daniel lowered himself into a nearby chair, she began to speak. Her words flowed like a river long dammed, rushing forth with an urgency that belied her composed exterior. "I wanted to protect you," she explained, her hands twisting in her lap, "to give you a freedom I never had." As she spoke of her own struggles as a talented Jewish woman in a restrictive society, Daniel could see the fire that still burned within her. She painted a vivid picture of her past, the blinding stage lights, the thunderous applause, the suffocating expectations that came with her faith and gender. "I was a bird in a gilded cage," she said, her eyes distant, seeing a world Daniel could only imagine. "I couldn't bear the thought of clipping your wings before you'd even learned to fly." Daniel listened, his emotions a turbulent sea. Understanding and disappointment crashed against each other like waves, leaving him unsteady. He leaned forward, drinking in every detail about his father, a Jewish musician whose life had been cut short when Daniel was just an infant. "Did you love him?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Alcarisi's face softened, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "Yes, in my way. But love wasn't enough to keep me tethered to a life I couldn't bear." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Daniel found himself grappling with the weight of his newfound heritage. It was as if he'd been given a key to a door he never knew existed, and now he stood on the threshold, unsure whether to step through. "What am I to do with this knowledge?" he asked, more to himself than to Alcarisi. The room seemed to close in around him, the weight of history and expectation pressing down on his shoulders. His mother, now remarried and facing her own mortality, reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool against his skin, a stark reminder of the time they'd lost. The simple gesture sent a jolt through Daniel, a connection to a past he'd never known. "You must forge your own path," she said, her voice tinged with both regret and resolve. "But promise me, Daniel, that you'll keep my past a secret from my current family." As Daniel left the room, the weight of his mother's story settled on his shoulders like a cloak. He had found answers, yes, but with them came new questions, new dilemmas. The complex interplay between personal choice and cultural identity stretched before him like an uncharted sea, and he knew that navigating it would be the greatest challenge of his life. He stepped out into the fading light of day, his mind reeling from the revelations. As he walked along the cobblestone streets of Genoa, the world around him seemed both familiar and utterly foreign. Every face he passed made him wonder about their hidden stories, their secret pasts. Just then, a gust of wind carried the salty scent of the Mediterranean to him. Daniel paused, his gaze drawn to the horizon where the sea met the sky. A storm was brewing in the distance, dark clouds gathering ominously. As he watched the choppy waters below, a chill ran down his spine. Somewhere out there, unbeknownst to him, another story was unfolding, one that would soon collide with his own in ways he could never imagine. The Mediterranean sun beat down mercilessly on the choppy waters. Its harsh glare stood in stark contrast to the darkness swirling in Gwendolen's heart. She stood on the deck of the ship, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. The salt-laden air whipped her hair, stinging her eyes, but she barely noticed. Her mind was trapped in a loop, replaying the horrific scene that had brought her to this moment. The memory of that fateful day crashed over her like the waves below. Grandcourt had insisted on taking the boat out, his voice cutting through the captain's warnings like a knife. "We're going," he had said, his tone brooking no argument. Gwendolen had followed, dread coiling in her stomach like a poisonous snake. She could still hear the sudden crack of wood, feel the lurch of the boat as it capsized. Grandcourt's startled cry echoed in her ears, mixing with the roar of the rushing water. In that moment, as he flailed in the sea, Gwendolen had hesitated. The life rope hung heavy in her hand, a lifeline she didn't throw. For a heartbeat, freedom had beckoned, tantalizing and terrible. Now, days later, that moment of hesitation haunted her. Had she wished for his death? Had her momentary inaction sealed his fate? The guilt gnawed at her insides, a ravenous beast that threatened to consume her whole. Gwendolen's newfound freedom came at a terrible cost. She inherited a portion of Grandcourt's wealth, but the majority went to his son by Lydia Glasher. The thought of Lydia brought a fresh wave of shame crashing over her, threatening to drown her in regret. The diamond necklace felt like a noose in Gwendolen's hands as she prepared to meet Lydia. Each glittering stone seemed to mock her, a reminder of her moral debt. The handover was a humiliating affair. Lydia's eyes bored into her, a mixture of triumph and disdain that made Gwendolen's skin crawl. "These belong to you now," Gwendolen had said, her voice barely above a whisper. As Lydia's fingers closed around the diamonds, Gwendolen felt a piece of herself being stripped away, leaving her raw and exposed. In the quiet moments when the weight of her actions threatened to crush her, Gwendolen found herself drawn to Daniel Deronda. His steady presence was like a lighthouse in the storm of her emotions, a beacon of hope in the darkness that threatened to engulf her. "I must tell you," she said one evening, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind, "about Grandcourt's death, about what I did." Daniel listened, his face a mask of compassion as Gwendolen poured out her guilt and anguish. Her words tumbled out, a torrent of pain and regret that left her spent and raw. When she finished, Daniel spoke softly, his words a balm to her tortured soul. "We cannot change the past, Gwendolen, but we can use our experiences to shape our future. Your pain, your regret, these can be the seeds of growth." For the first time since Grandcourt's death, Gwendolen allowed herself to contemplate a future beyond her guilt. Daniel's words offered a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark in the vast darkness of her despair. As the Mediterranean coast faded into the distance, Gwendolen stood once more at the ship's railing. The sea, once a symbol of her torment, now stretched before her like a canvas of possibilities. She thought of Daniel's advice to find purpose in helping others, to use her experiences as a catalyst for change. The wind whipped her hair, and Gwendolen closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges. But as she stood there, poised between her past and her future, Gwendolen felt the first stirrings of determination. She would face her demons, confront her past actions, and strive to lead a life of meaning and purpose. With a deep breath, Gwendolen turned from the railing and walked towards her cabin. It was time to begin the difficult work of reassessing her values, of charting a new course. The journey would be long and arduous, but for the first time in years, Gwendolen felt ready to face it head-on. As she reached for the door handle, a commotion on deck caught her attention. Turning, she saw Daniel engage in an intense conversation with a stranger. The man's features were strikingly similar to Daniel's, and there was an urgency in their exchange that made Gwendolen's heart race. What new revelation was about to unfold, and how would it affect the fragile hope she had just begun to nurture? Daniel Deronda had undergone a profound transformation. His recent discoveries and experiences had led him to fully embrace his Jewish heritage, forging a deep connection to his roots that he had never known before. The warm sunlight streamed through the window of his study, casting a golden glow on the piles of books scattered across his desk. Daniel's fingers traced the lines of Hebrew text, the once unfamiliar letters now as comforting as old friends. The musty scent of aged paper mingled with the fresh breeze drifting in from the open window, creating an atmosphere of both antiquity and renewal. As he delved deeper into the rich tapestry of his people's past, Daniel felt a weight settle on his shoulders. It wasn't a burden, but rather a mantle of responsibility that filled him with a sense of purpose he had long sought. His mind raced with possibilities, his heart swelling with newfound passion. In quiet moments, Daniel's thoughts drifted to Mirah. Her gentle smile and unwavering faith had been a beacon during his journey of self-discovery. Now, as he contemplated his future, he couldn't imagine it without her by his side. Love and duty intertwined in his heart, each strengthening the other like the threads of a finely woven tapestry. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves outside his window turned golden and red, Daniel made his decision. The air was thick with anticipation, matching the nervous energy coursing through his veins. With trembling hands, he penned a note to Mirah, asking her to meet him in the garden at sunset. As the sky blazed with vibrant hues of orange and pink, Daniel took Mirah's hands in his. The soft rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds provided a gentle backdrop to this pivotal moment. His voice, usually so composed, quivered with emotion as he spoke of his love for her and his vision for their future together. Mirah's eyes shimmered with tears of joy as she accepted, their embrace sealing a promise of shared dreams and devotion. The following days were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Daniel's conversation with Sir Hugo was like navigating a stormy sea, waves of surprise and concern giving way to understanding and support. The older man's weathered face softened as he placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, his voice gruff with pride as he said, "You've found your path, my boy. Walk it with courage." Perhaps the most poignant moment came when Daniel shared his plans with Mordecai. The frail man's eyes lit up with a fire that seemed to push back the encroaching shadows of his illness. "You are the fulfillment of my dreams," Mordecai whispered, his grip on Daniel's hand surprisingly strong. The weight of generations seemed to pass between them in that touch, a torch of hope and responsibility being passed from one to the other. As Daniel prepared for this new chapter in his life, he often found himself lost in thought, marveling at the twists and turns that had brought him to this point. Like a tapestry viewed from afar, he could now see the intricate pattern that had been woven by what once seemed like random threads of chance and circumstance. In the quiet of his room, a smile played on his lips as he recognized the hand of destiny in his journey. The future stretched before him, filled with purpose and love. Yet as he stood on the precipice of this new life, a nagging thought tugged at the edges of his mind. There was still one loose end to tie up, one final conversation that needed to be had. Daniel's heart raced as he realized what he had to do. With a mixture of dread and determination, he penned a letter to Gwendolen requesting a meeting. As he sealed the envelope, he couldn't shake the feeling that this conversation would change everything, not just for him, but for Gwendolen as well. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy in the air as Daniel prepared himself for what was to come. The paths of the main characters diverge as they embark on new chapters in their lives. Daniel Deronda, with a heavy heart, prepares to deliver news that will forever change his relationship with Gwendolen. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the garden, painting the world in hues of gold and amber. A crisp breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke, a bittersweet reminder of endings and new beginnings. Daniel's footsteps crunched on the gravel path as he approached Gwendolen, his heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words. Gwendolen stood by a weathered stone bench, her pale blue dress a stark contrast to the vibrant colors of the dying foliage. Her eyes, once filled with hope and admiration, now held a glimmer of apprehension. She sensed the gravity of the moment, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her sleeve. "Gwendolen," Daniel began, his voice gentle but firm, "I have something important to tell you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and portentous. Daniel watched as the color drained from Gwendolen's face, her lips parting slightly in anticipation. With each carefully chosen word, he explained his decision to marry Mirah and dedicate himself to Jewish causes. The air grew thick with unspoken emotions, like a fog settling over a once clear landscape. Gwendolen's world tilted on its axis, her unspoken hopes for a future with Daniel crumbling like sandcastles washed away by the tide. She stumbled backward, her hand grasping the cold stone of the bench for support. I see," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. As the initial shock subsided, a new understanding began to take root in Gwendolen's heart. She realized that her path to redemption and self-improvement lay not in Daniel, but within herself. The realization was both terrifying and liberating, like standing on the edge of a cliff, poised to take flight. Meanwhile, preparations for Daniel and Mirah's wedding were underway. The ceremony, steeped in Jewish tradition, unfolded like a tapestry of joy and sorrow. Mordecai, his face gaunt but eyes bright with pride, gave the couple his blessing before succumbing to his illness. The air was filled with the bittersweet scent of orange blossoms and the soft murmur of prayers, a poignant reminder of life's fleeting nature. As the newlyweds planned their move to the east, their excitement was palpable. They pored over maps spread across a worn oak table, their fingers tracing the routes to a land that held both their heritage and their future. Their preparations were like seeds being planted, full of potential and promise. Gwendolen, left to face an uncertain future, found herself at a crossroads. The weight of her past mistakes pressed heavily upon her, but with each passing day she felt a growing sense of moral responsibility. She decided to use her inheritance not for personal gain, but to support her family and engage in charitable works. Her first steps into this new world were tentative, like a fawn learning to walk. She volunteered at local charities, her hands once adorned with jewels now busy with practical tasks. As she worked, she began to see how her experiences could be a beacon for other women trapped in difficult situations. Sir Hugo and his family watched Daniel's transformation with a mixture of pride and melancholy. They organized a farewell gathering, a bittersweet affair that highlighted the stark contrast between Daniel's new life and the one he was leaving behind. The drawing room, once a stage for idle gossip and social maneuverings, now buzzed with discussions of far-off lands and lofty ideals. As the day of departure drew near, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows of the past. Mirah's father, a man whose absence had shaped so much of her life, attempted to reconnect with his daughter. His appearance was like a discordant note in a symphony, briefly disrupting the harmony before being silenced. Mirah, with newfound strength, sent him away, closing that chapter of her life with a finality that surprised even herself. The day of Daniel and Mirah's departure dawned bright and clear, as if nature itself approved of their journey. They stood at the threshold of their new life, their eyes shining with purpose and hope. As they boarded the ship that would carry them to their destiny, the breeze seemed to whisper promises of adventure and fulfillment. Back on shore, Gwendolen watched the ship disappear into the horizon. The vast expanse of sea before her mirrored the journey of self-discovery that lay ahead. With each breaking wave, she felt a renewed determination to rebuild her life and find her own sense of purpose. As the ship became a mere speck in the distance, Gwendolen turned away from the harbor. The salty air filled her lungs, invigorating her with a sense of possibility. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders and lifting her chin. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Gwendolen felt ready to face it head-on. She walked away from the harbor, her steps growing more confident with each stride. The bustling streets of the town stretched before her, a world of opportunities waiting to be explored. Gwendolen's heart, once burdened by regret and unfulfilled desires, now beat with a newfound rhythm of hope and determination. As she made her way through the crowded streets, Gwendolen caught sight of her reflection in a shop window. The woman staring back at her was changed, her eyes holding a depth and wisdom that hadn't been there before. She smiled, a small but genuine gesture, acknowledging the growth and challenges that lay behind and ahead of her. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Gwendolen paused for a moment, taking in the beauty of the world around her. She realized that this ending was also a beginning, a chance to rewrite her story and become the person she was meant to be. With a final glance toward the sea, Gwendolen turned her back on the past and stepped forward into her future. The road ahead was long and uncertain, but she was ready to face it with courage and grace. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Gwendolen walked on, her heart full of hope and her spirit unbroken, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.